I'm Linda Lara from the Aspen Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to another program in the series, Conversations with Great Leaders, in memory of Preston Robert Tisch. Now in its 12th year, the series is funded by the Tisch family, Steve, Laurie, John, and Lizzie Tisch, and the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund. Today's program is in partnership with the Aspen Institute Business and Society program. Today's discussion is the one that I imagine is taking place in businesses across the country, as corporate leaders are increasingly expected to consider a myriad of issues of importance to their employees, shareholders, and communities, issues such as the environment and healthcare, issues such as racial equity, when making business decisions. How does a business leader balance the often conflicting needs of its various stakeholder groups? And does a corporation have a role in maintaining a democratic society? We are fortunate to have as our speaker today a thoughtful corporate leader whose business experience has led her to consider and sometimes act upon these questions. Rosalind Brewer joined Walgreens Boots Alliance as its Chief Executive Officer in March of this year and serves as director on its board. Her past positions include CEO and group president at Starbucks and president and CEO of Sam's Club, a membership-only retail warehouse club and a division of Walmart Inc. She has also served on a number of boards, including the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, Starbucks, and Amazon, and is currently chairperson of the Board of Trustees for Spelman College. Our moderator for today's conversation is the founder and executive director of the Aspen Institute's Business and Society program, Judy Samuelson. Judy's projects over her more than 20 years at the Institute include a rethinking of corporate purpose and long-term value creation, as well as executive pay. Her recent book, The 6 New Rules of Business, Creating Real Value in a Changing World, opens with a quote from the former dean of Harvard's Business School, Nitin Nohria, which I think gives an insight into our discussion today. As Nitin says, quote, "None of the major problems confronting the globe today, sustainability, healthcare, poverty, financial system repair, can be solved unless business plays a significant role." And now I'll turn the program over to Judy for the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. And welcome to all of you and to Rosalind Brewer. May I call you Roz? Should I call you Rosalind?
Everyone calls me Roz. It's perfect.
Everyone calls you Roz. Well, I have seen it a lot, and I'm so thrilled to have this time to get to know you a little bit and to explore the kind of path that's taken you to the leadership of what, the more I read, the more I want to read about this remarkable company and its history and the remarkable challenges. I mean, in some ways, if you kind of go back to the history of Walgreens or Walgreens Boots Alliance, we'll talk a little bit about how that came about. You're seeing the kind of the mirror of the history of retail in the US and developed markets, and of course, rapid expansion into markets around the globe. And so thank you so much for spending time with us. We're delighted to get to know you here at the Aspen Institute. So I do want to just go back for a minute, if I could, into the history. You know, Walgreens itself, I think, is at 120 years. This year, if I recall. Founded in 1901, all of these companies seem to have started with a drugstore and then an entrepreneurial owner who kept on moving. But for those who don't understand how we now call it Walgreens Boots Alliance, anybody who's been through Heathrow, of course, gets drawn into a Boots pharmacy. I remember taking my kids through there when they were younger and couldn't get them out to get into London. They just wanted to hang out in that incredible drugstore at the airport. But that is a company whose roots go back to, I think, 1849. And then Alliance or Alliance or Alianza, depending on what part of Europe we're in, is itself a roll-up of many drugstore chains across Europe and beyond. Together today, I believe, and check me on my facts, through the mergers and acquisitions, and finally the bringing together of these three strands, if you will, first Boots Alliance, and then the merger in the last decade with Walgreens, I think that takes us to $140 billion in revenue.
Yes.
Remarkable growth over the last couple of decades, but you stand, I think, according to the website, anyway, 19,000 stores today, operating in 25 countries, and 450,000 employees globally.
That's correct. Yes.
How do you sleep at night? Is maybe where I would start.
Yes.
But let me just say a couple of more things about this company. In 2018, talking about complexity, it replaced GE as one of the 30 stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So we all know the pressures of operating a public company. So let's add that to the mix. But I also think there's some great fun facts about Walgreens. Invented the malted milkshake, which really means it kind of invented the soda fountain back in the 1920s, which I gather was something that happened as a result of prohibition and needing to find new ways to get people to gather. Is that a fair?
Absolutely.
That's
very fair. Yes.
Walgreens operated a store inside the Pentagon for 40 years.
That's right. It sure did.
And then Boots was the very first store, was the very first drug chain to move to self-service. Talk about something we take for granted today, but rather than standing behind the counter and pointing, I'll take a box of that and I need some aspirin, please.
Right.
So the innovations that have taken place through these remarkable companies that make up the foundings of Walgreens Boots Alliance is one of the remarkable stories. But I'll just end with this. 2018, the Boots, the iconic beauty brands of Boots were invited onto Alibaba's B2C platform for international brands and retailers, which I believe on that day would have added 500 million customers to your array of service requirements and offerings. So,
yes.
So let me just start by saying thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'm sure you've got other things to do, but we're delighted to get a chance to explore you and your leadership a little bit today. So let me just ask you first, I mean, given the array of things that, are true about walking in a drugstore today, I was in Chicago over the weekend and I had to walk into the Walgreens there and was thinking, how long will it take before you bring Starbucks into the platform? But I see Freshie has already arrived. So the very first thing you see is something that takes us kind of back to the era of the soda fountain again.
Yes.
How do you describe the company? What business is Walgreens in? Or WBA or Walgreens Boots Alliance?
Yes. So Judy, I appreciate the history lesson you took our guests through. It shows really the innovation that this company has had over the past 120 years. And, it's really exciting. You said you were in Chicago. We sit here in Deerfield, Illinois. That's where I am today. And our world headquarters is here. And, the Walgreens family is, a historic family here in the area. But this tradition of innovation is something that I think is so amazing about this company because it's 120 years ago. And when you think about almost every decade, it chose to reinvent itself, right? And each time it was ahead of the next technology. To think that they were in self-service technology way before the Amazon Go store, right? Yeah. And so we want to applaud all the new technology that's been developed. But if we look back in our history, many other companies were onto something years ago. So when I think about WBA right now, I think about the concentration we have in health and beauty. And the focus right now is building healthier and happier lives. And that's one customer, one patient at a time. And, it takes everything from the front of our buildings where you may be looking at cosmetics to the back of our stores where you're handling probably a new diagnosis. Someone walks in our store every day that's probably received some bad news, and we're the first recipient they'll see after that bad news. And we have to be really in touch with that to say, we're convenient. You can grab a few things for home, but by the time they make it to the back and begin to have a conversation with our extremely experienced pharmacists, they get a chance to connect, right? And we get to know what's really going on in their lives. So, I'd like to describe us as a company, in the health and beauty business, but actually we're in the business of helping the consumer live healthier and happier lives. And there are many ways that we attach to that every day.
So that takes us back to March 15th this year. You joined the company on an auspicious date, to put it mildly. I believe that would have been in New York the first day of lockdown. I know I went home on the subway on Friday night on the 13th and ended up not coming back to the office for 16 months. So take us back to that moment of Walgreens' responsibilities in that moment. Obviously, it's been a major provider of testing as well as vaccines. Another fun fact, 2018, earlier this year, I guess, or at the end of last year, the boot team in the UK trained 2,000 UK Army professionals who had been tagged to pilot mass testing in Liverpool as a rollout in the UK for doing mass testing of rapid prototyping, of rapid testing of that in and of itself is an interesting kind of example of where Walgreens meets public health. So if you could talk a little bit more about your responsibilities in that moment, what were some of the decisions you had to make as you joined?
Absolutely. So you're right, Judy. March 15th was 12 months after the shutdown in the United States, New York City in particular. So 12 months later, this country was deeply embedded in not only testing of the virus, but then just beginning the thoughts of administering vaccines. And so we had started that process in December, but at that point, it was really in full blown because they were expanding accessibility. But here's what's interesting. When you talk about reinvention and innovation, think about this company, because for us to be in the testing and immunization business, it was one part of what we were doing for a living, but it has become mainstream for us. And understand that in the back of all of this work, there's technology behind that, right? Because you have to schedule those appointments. You have to schedule the labor. You've got to order different materials. You've got to keep them on a cold chain. So that took our business in a whole different flip on its side. And it's been exciting to see this team come together. But I came in, you're right, mid-March, and we knew that sooner or later we were going to have to ramp up all of the work that we were doing. Not only that, we chose to do something a little bit different than other entities. We wanted to make sure that we would provide access to those who needed the vaccines the most. We had seen, and this company had been following the data around who had accessibility to the vaccine, and also who understood it, who needed training, development, and understanding around why it's important to get a vaccine. And it was people of color. And we decided as a company to become very mobile in our administration of vaccines. We created mobile units where we moved around the country and placed either a mobile unit, or we would place a physical team at a long-term care facility. We touched 27,000 long-term care facilities, and we've now administered more than 30 million vaccines. And so it's pretty exciting to see what this company could do when you roll it back and say, well, I thought you guys were, the corner drugstore, right? But we know that what's important for us is to be when and where our customers and patients need us the most at the time they need us the most. And so we really took it upon ourselves to do everything we possibly could to create equity in vaccine administration. And I think we've done that in great order. We've hit the zip codes that needed us the most. We've been in churches, and then any kind of pop-up facility we could actually be in. And that work continues.
So that's an amazing story. And has to be a bit of a, if you think back on your career, you've had many remarkable moments. One part that didn't come up in Linda's recitation of your bio is that you spent 22 years initially at Kimberly-Clark in, the consumer products company and researcher, product management, and then oversight of the global operations and manufacturing. And, if you kind of add that together with your presidency, the head of Sam's Club, big box retailer, and then Starbucks, which has an iconic brand in and of itself, and is a leader in sustainability, I think by anybody's measure. It's tackled many incredible questions and continues to lead with that. You kind of have the resume we want today, it seems to me, at the leadership of a company like that. But that wasn't where you were headed. As I read your own interests, early on you were interested in science and math, but thought you might become a doctor. So when did you fall off that truck, and how did you end up in business?
That was pretty early on that I decided that, medical school for me was not in the picture. It was a couple of things that did that for me. My senior year in college, I was a chemistry major. I was thinking about graduate school. There were 4 of us in college, my siblings and I, and my parents, trying to afford all of that. And then, lo and behold, my dad passed away. And, he was definitely, the financial contributor to all of us for college. So I had to think about what next to do. And I jumped out and went into corporate. And I made the decision pretty fast, to sort of divert from graduate school and then go straight into the workplace. And, I've been pretty fortunate. Kimberly-Clark was a great landing spot. I came in research and development. I worked for a great leader and encouraged me that this was possibly a good track for me. So, it reminds me that if it weren't for that one gentleman that I worked for when I first came into the corporate world, I don't know that I would have stayed, but there was something about my leader, and it reminds me every day how important leadership is and the influence you can have on someone's life, because it really, it gave me the stickiness to maybe make it where I am today.
So let me use that as a bridge to a kind of a domain that I'm personally very interested in and write about, which is the changing role of CEOs in terms of, as a colleague of ours, a member of our advisory board who is head of search practice at Korn Ferry, she talks about the CEO today as being the leader of a community. And I think the most important part of the community is the employees themselves. They, in some respects, to a great extent, they have become, I believe, the new accountability mechanism for companies, much more so than investors that come in lots of shapes and sizes, or consumers that are often, bound to price and convenience, or drawn to price and convenience. But employees, there's a lot of talk about the impact of COVID on workers, and kind of a fresh look at the role of workers, and kind of a call to action by business. Do you actually agree with that? Have you seen a real change in attitude in the time in this COVID period? How do you kind of think about the question of workers and their well-being in this moment? How do you lead in that particular respect?
I think that's an excellent question, Judy. First of all, I have to tell you, I've always been intrigued by the employee. It's actually the reason why I left Kimberly-Clark to go to Walmart, because Walmart had 2.2 million employees that I knew if I could be in a decision set and make a decision for the lives of those people, I could really shift, a large part of the communities, right? Who has to, that's such a large number. So it's fantastic to get that opportunity. But when you talk about, has there been a shift since COVID? I have to tell you, this shift was happening beforehand. I think what COVID did for all of us, it was the defining moment combined with the social unrest that was happening. Because recall that the murder of George Floyd combined with the pandemic, we saw inequities right in front of us in so many different ways, right? Access to healthcare, trust in healthcare, trust in our authorities in communities, police officers. We saw loss of trust. We saw inequities in terms of what's the distribution of healthcare and accessibility and affordability as well. And so all of that is hitting at a time where people are also feeling that their personal lives are threatened, either by the pandemic or by walking outside of their house with a Black hoodie on. So that will change. But I also, it's interesting to me in hiring Gen Zers today, they're digital natives, but being digital natives, you would think, well, they've just been stuck, looking everything digital. They want community. They want location. I live in the house with a couple of those myself. And, I think about when they think about their first job, they look for location first and say, well, who's in New York City? I'm going to look in New York City because I want to live in New York City. I would have never done that when I finished college. It was, I want to do X. I'm going to go find it. I know I'm going to have to relocate. I've not lived in the same place as my siblings and parents since I left high school, right? Because I looked at the opportunity. That would never happen. So they're looking for location. They're actually they want to come to a company where they're communicated to. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. That's so different than years past. So I do think that there is something underfoot here, but I think what happened is that this happened all at a time where it just came together, and it is changing the face. And, I think it's a great reckoning that we all need to listen to.
There's a quote attributed to you: listen at all levels. Some of the best ideas come from those on the front lines.
Absolutely.
If that's true that you said that, how do you put that in action? Like, what are your own personal habits in that respect?
Yes. So for me, I have always been, the kind of person that, when I worked in manufacturing, when you go in a manufacturing facility, there's the glass offices on the top overlooking the machines, and you can watch the operations and you can see the data coming in and talk about the machine production. I'd always want to leave and go down the back steps and then just kind of walk around, right? Because when you watch the work that they're doing, first of all, I'm sensitive to the decisions that I am making. Like, what decision did I make to impact just how difficult this work is for that person? And then I get a chance to spark a conversation. People want to talk, right? And so you really get what's happening when you're down on the shop floor. And in retail, you walk in a retail store, the first thing, whenever I walk in, when I was with, any of the big boxes, you walk in, you want to see a team that's like looking right out at the customer, right? As soon as they walk in, they're queuing in on the customer. When you walk in and they're looking down on their feet, that means they're not proud of their building. They're not proud of where they work. And you've got to address that. So I always walk in and I just want that initial reaction about, how are they feeling about things? And then I'll approach them. And for me, I have always enjoyed being part of just on the floor. It's the place where I learn the most. I listen intensely because that part of your organization, they know everything, right? They're facing that customer each and every day. And those insights, I can look at insights, I can see all the data when it's rolled up, but it's nothing like walking into, the store on Michigan Avenue and around State Street and just talking and say, what's happening right here in this store? Who's your customer and how's the customer doing? And the feedback that you get, it comes back and my decisions get stronger, right? I come back and I talk to my leadership team and tell them, this is what I learned and this is what we might be missing. So I get my greatest energy, as you can tell, from just, being right where the work happens.
Right. So we're seeing some questions already pop up. I want to ask you a couple more things and then we'll take some of the questions that are coming from the audience. But one of the themes that's already coming up is kind of how do you sustain your values? And how do you kind of operate in a company with such remarkable complexity? And managing the supply chain alone makes me dizzy. So it's good you came in with the international and manufacturing background where you probably have managed those kinds of operations in the past. But I'm interested in this question of leadership and also women. Do they lead differently, do you believe? Let me just pause to make the obvious point that you are one of, I believe, 2 Black women today leading Fortune 500 companies.
Yes.
You came in about the same time as Sunda Brown Duckett at TA-CREF, and sometimes you guys are paired. So it's both. Do you actually think women lead differently? And kind of how do you feel about that kind of very personal attribute of being a Black woman, being kind of linked to your leadership all the time?
Sure. So I'm going to pull that apart a little bit. Do women
Please.
lead differently? And then the experience through a Black woman's experience. I know for certain that women are natural nurturers, right? And, just innately, we are probably dealing with how someone is emoting about something versus what's coming out of their mouth or what actions they're taking. So we tend to read a room, we read the body language, and we want to know what's going on in your head. And I think that allows us to then say, what's happening with my team and how do I adjust? Like for me as a female leader, I know for my 12 direct reports, each one of them, they are an individual. They are different. And so I don't talk to or deal with my CFO the same way I would with my communications lead. They're two different people because I've sort of learned who they are. And I think about that a lot. Who are they and how do we need to interact with each other? And so that is first and foremost for me, right? And so I think that comes from me being a woman. I'm also a mom. And so, I've had to groom 2 children. And for me, the most important work I can do is to create my legacy through those 2 children. And so I watch them intensely on how they learn, how they want to interact. When are they at their best? Getting them to their best, not demanding that they be the best, but helping them get to their best. So I live through that lens. But then you put another filter on this, being an African-American woman. And I'll have to tell you that most of the roles that I've had, I, tend to pick up on, the underrepresented. So this issue around access to vaccinations and vaccine equity, health inequities, I can't tell you how important that is to me. I've seen it in my family. I've seen, my family member, true story, family member admitted to the hospital. My family's in Michigan. They're not getting the treatment. I actually had to come home, right? Flew right into the hospital. And I got there and I just said, I just want to see, who's the head physician here? And they're like, head physician? So then the conversation changes. And so I had to get the room changed. Where's the neurologist? You have to start, you need an advocate. It should not be that way. We're all humans. We need healthcare. We need access. It shouldn't take me flying in to take care of each one of my family members because I come in there kind of with my corporate headset on, and that shouldn't be required.
So this is an on-ramp, right, to a question that is coming through from the audience about kind of this moment where we seem to be seeing CEOs who are acting more on kind of morality or who are raising questions of their public or civic leadership. And this is something that in the Business and Society program, we actually have watched very closely. There is a host of issues. None of them as a retailer are easy because anybody who walks in your store may be in different places politically on some of the questions, everything from kind of the right to carry guns into a store to, the questions around immigration, around obviously the kind of questions around political spending that came up after January 6th and the Capitol insurrection. All of these things are complicated. And I have on my wall, the big "We Stand for Democracy" pledge that was made by hundreds of different CEOs in the wake of the Capitol. What is compelling CEOs from your stance today, from your experience? What is actually bringing them to the table? How do you talk about that? And then let's talk about your own voice and what you think is ahead of you.
Yes, I think it's a realization now that, the most significant changes are going to be made when public sector meets private sector. It's absolutely going to take both. The examples stem from, companies get a chance to say, how are people going to have health benefits? How are we going to support them in terms of their wages, their labor, their quality of lifestyle? We own part of that. Let's face it. And I think most CEOs have faced that we own quality of life for people that we care about. When you run these big companies, you have to care about the people that work for you. It's a stark difference when you don't. Right. Short-term CEO, long-term CEO. And I think those that get it have recognized that they can do their part, but then they've got to have that partnership so that we can make change happen on a national level. And I think the other thing that many CEOs have also realized is that it's the relationship between the public and private sector, because many times we as CEOs are on the front lines of what's really happening in the lives of people. And sometimes we've got to talk to local senators, local congressmen, mayors, all the way up to the office of the president, to share that data and information so that they know the richness of the decisions that they make and what that realistic impact is going to be. And so that's why it takes both to make change happen. I think, the CEO that's become more compassionate, you cannot make these decisions without thinking about who you're going to impact when you make these decisions. And sometimes you're right. You never know what side of the coin you're going to go on. But what you have to do is to say, I'm going to do the right thing when no one's watching, right? I'm not going to be told that I need to do this. I'm going to do what's right because my personal integrity leads me there. So I think some of the, what I would say, the CEOs that I've admired over the years, the peers that I've admired, they're the ones who wear their integrity on their sleeve, and it's undeniable. They make decisions through who they are as a person, and those are your best CEOs. And I just see more gravitating to that. You cannot avoid that now. The decisions are too big and too comprehensive when you're making a lot of these decisions.
I want to come back. You mentioned, you put the question of wages on the table, and one question's come in that I want to return to in a second. But what are you compelled to talk about? I mean, and you're still early in your tenure. You've
Yes.
been there 6 months, or is it just 6 months? I guess it's a little over 6 months now. No, it's 6 months today. It's 6 months tomorrow. Congratulations.
Tomorrow, September 15th. That's right.
6 months tomorrow. Where is your own voice in this moment?
Yeah, so, there's a couple of things that, I constantly think about. I think about being at Starbucks when we initiated as a leadership team race and gender pay equity. That was a big thing because prior to Starbucks, whenever I took over a new unit, I go to my HR partner and say, lay out for me. I want to see my top 100, and I want to see women, minorities. Let's see how everybody's getting paid. And I'd find more than a handful of disparities. And I'd have to, one by one, get those fixed. And, I want to be that leader that says, I'm not going to stand for that, right? Don't let me have to ask that question, right? Mm-hmm. Do the right thing when no one's watching. And so I'm a big proponent on equity, pay equity for race and gender. I think the second thing that I'm compelled to is to really focus on this piece around affordable access to healthcare. I think it's an absolute game changer. And I think it starts very early on. The data is there that when young children go to school and they've not been fed well, when young children go to school and they've only received their immunizations, but they've not had checkups, and they don't have those indicators that there's something going on there that affects their learning abilities. It's those kinds of things that are too many times zip code related. And that really, for me, I hope I can have some impact on changing those things.
Is that a question of your agency at WBA, or is that something where you need to move into public policy to make that? Can you give us a short answer on that? I want to make sure I get back
Sure.
to
I think, to be honest with you, I think that WBA can really be the center of this, but it is going to take a partnership, and we're doing that now. We're creating the partnerships.
And that's partly bringing doctors into stores as more of a kind of medical hub within a store. Is that part of the solution?
It's first of all, it's a couple of things. First of all, we have 9,100 stores, and those stores are in the broadest array of zip codes, probably better than most retailers, which is one of the things that attracted me to this company, because I've always worked on creating new stores and new formats and deciding where the stores are going to go. I looked at that footprint of the 9,100 stores and I was like, love the zip codes. They're covered, right? And so that's one thing that I really appreciate about this company. So we are within 5 miles of most households. So we already can provide access. We can be a pillar in the community. We can be local healthcare. And so I like that about this company. And so, yes, it did start here. This one of the things that attracted me here to the company was the start of how we can be local healthcare providers.
Let me go back. We have a question from Rick Wartzman, who is with the Drucker Institute and has been a real leader on kind of questions around employee well-being and worker well-being, and works out of California. But I believe that Walgreens has committed to, or WBA has committed to a $15 an hour wage in the United States. First of all, am I
Yes.
correct on that? Is that
You
still
are
ahead
correct.
of you, or are you already there?
We just announced it 10 days ago, I think.
And what would be the wage today, could I ask?
There's a range. First of all, there's many cities and states that have taken federal wage hikes, and so we have followed those. So we probably have a range right now, but we'll be at $15 an hour by October of next year. So we're going to gradually move into that space.
And do you think the job's done then? Is $15 an hour a living wage? Is what his question is. So I'm putting that on the table for you.
You know, this is one of the things that we're monitor. We will move along with the, you know, the challenges and the affordability, you know, in our US space. And so I imagine, just like everything else, that $15 will move, and we'll have to move with it.
And so that range will depend on geography as well. In other words, it'll have to vary based on geography.
Well, what we're going to do is go to lift everybody up to $15. I think it's interesting to see that some states actually are much lower than what we believe. If you look at some of the states in the Southeast, their minimum wage can be as low as $8 or $9, right? And so if we're paying 15, we're paying
Way above, right.
way above, you know, the minimum wage of that location. So that's what I mean about, you know, it'll move with the geography, but there is a base that we'll start at. So we're up leveling the base.
So one of the other questions here, and this is a complicated one, but you're a member of the Business Roundtable, and as you know, 2 years ago, they came out with a restatement about the purpose of the corporation. This is work that we feel strongly about at the Aspen Institute and have been engaged in for a long period of time. And of course, the question today is whether or not we're actually seeing business live to the commitments that seem to be in the public sphere. You know, are they in fact, I mean, this is one important element of it, but it's not the only one. There are deep questions about supply chain. There are deep questions about environmental sustainability. But there are, I guess the question that I would pose to you is, how much freedom do you have as a public company to be doing everything you would like to do? And how do you manage that pressure?
Yeah. You know, I think your freedom is managed by your courage, right? And so there are consequences to every decision we make. And some of those decisions, we might make a decision, you know, and ignore the pursuit of profit. And because it's the right thing to do. And I'm seeing companies do that. I'm seeing partner companies, you know, make some decisions around, you know, what, not only things around wages, but actually, where do you want to place your next store location? It's really interesting to, you know, you could almost do the math and say, I can make more money if I put a store there, but that's a food desert over there. And that's a healthcare desert over there. So I'm going to put 2 stores over there, and I'm going to put maybe 3 stores so that I can balance my portfolio. But it's that kind of leader that has the courage to say, I'm not going to ignore that food desert. I'm going to do the right thing and put a store in there anyway. And if I get complaints about it, I'm going to explain my story, right? And so I'm encouraged to see, you know, more companies making decisions that are not always profit related.
Where do you draw your courage to lead, Roz? These are remarkable enterprises that you have led. What is the source of that for you?
Yes, you know, I just feel like, you know, after having watched my parents sacrifice for me all these years, they actually worked a lot harder than I did, right? So I'm probably, you know, I'm sure, you know, I'm making more money than, you know, they did, obviously, but they worked hard. I mean, for my mother to walk 3 blocks in the snow at midnight to catch the bus to do, you know, work on the assembly line at General Motors, that's a hard day. That's a hard job with 5 kids, with your husband working 3 jobs. So like no parent at home and the older kids assisting the younger kids. I feel like my life is easy. So I'm going to make those tough decisions because someone made those tough decisions on my behalf so that I could be where I am. So I get up every morning saying, you know, I'm ready. You know, I want to make change happen. I feel like I have nothing to lose, more to gain for the people around me. I'm absolutely committed to that, and always will be.
Let me ask you about another one about kind of question of women today. I mean, there's been so much in the press in the last year about women choosing to leave business. Maybe they're leaving work in some respects because of the requirements of, you know, what they need to do to manage at home. I think the statistic is something like 41 CEOs, female CEOs in the Fortune 500, something like that. Not a number to be particularly proud of.
Right.
At times, I feel like it's really shifting, and we're seeing some real leverage. And of course, the problem is not just one in business; it's also one in politics and beyond. But
Yes.
you know, what do you think about the future place of women in business in particular? What's your point of view, and do you feel pressure on you to somehow perform in a way that's going to bring women into the business sector?
You know, I feel the only pressure I feel is to make the decisions that could possibly provide them a great place to work. You know, I think about right now trying to decide, should we all return to office, right? Every company is facing that right now. And I come back to, every second I think about this, I have to think about flexibility, because it's that mom or even the dad sometimes, you know, that this falls back on when that child has to stay home and quarantine for 10 days to 14 days. You know, I want my best employees to say, for 10 days, I'm going to work from home. And then, and they work. When people work from home, they work 24/7. Let's be serious here. So they're not going home doing bonbons, they're working. So for me, I feel like, what can I do to provide flexibility? Because I want people to feel like, you know, a full life is, you know, being able to use your brain every day, do something that you're passionate about, something you love, and take care of your family. To me, that's the winning ticket, right? It's rarely is it one or the other. You know, there's a lot of statistics now that show us that those people who work 100% from home, you know, suffer a little bit more with anxiety and depression, because we're humans, right? We want to connect at some point. So I want to find that flexibility and that point that where it works for you, the person, you, the young mom, you, the young dad, and to figure out how I can meet you halfway. And I think that's what's next for all of us to consider, is flexibility.
Okay, last question. Fun fact, and we only have a minute on this one. 2018, you started drug delivery by drone. How's it working out?
You know, it's kind of interesting. There's been a lot of tech advancements since then. And actually, you know, people really like to come and pick up from store. So I will tell you that more than drone delivery, pickup at store has been an advantage to many of us as retailers. People want to get out, and they do, and they want to come in for a second, but they want their stuff, they want the service of it being ready for them. So I will tell you that the immediacy of convenience for something to drop on your doorstep, yes, it's absolutely there. But the idea of coming to pick up at store also has been a trend that I think we've all responded to, and we're seeing great movement there in our Walgreens and Boots stores.
Well, great. Well, Roz, thank you so much for taking time and to spend time with us in the Business Society program with the Tisch Leadership Series. We are very grateful to the series. And Linda, would you like to come back in to say,
I'd love to come back in and say what a enlightening and important conversation. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Roz Brewer, very much. Thank you to the Tisch family for enabling us to present conversations like this. And I thank you to our audience for coming forward and for presenting us with some very interesting questions today.
Absolutely.
So we look forward to seeing you again soon, either in person or virtually. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roz. And thank you for opening up the store to us a little bit today in your own career and aspirations and we wish you the absolute best of futures in this extraordinary enterprise. Our success is going to be our success. Your success is going to be our success. That I'm confident about. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Judy.